Hello, Rank Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the number one checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the all-new, fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power and advanced Audi tech. The next chapter of Audi starts now.
In the Champions League knockout phase, every decisive moment gives you goosebumps.
I get those goosebumps every time.
No, would you believe this?
The UEFA Champions League Round of 16. Stream every match live exclusively on Paramount+.
There are some things in life that just shouldn't be forgotten. Like bringing your keys when you leave the house, setting your fantasy lineup, and most importantly, having Hidden Valley Ranch to watch the game. Especially if wings are on the menu. Those creamy, zesty Cool Ranch flavors take each spicy, savory bite to an unforgettable level. Hidden Valley Ranch, only serious about flavor.
Did you know 39% of teen drivers admit to texting while driving? Even scarier, those who text are more likely to speed and run red lights. Shockingly, 94% know it's dangerous, but do it anyway. As a parent, you can't always be in the car, but you can stay connected to their safety with Greenlight Infinity's driving reports. Monitor their driving habits, see if they're using their phone, speeding, and more. These reports provide real data for meaningful conversations about safety. Plus, with weekly updates, you can track their progress over time. Help keep your teens safe. Sign up for Greenlight Infinity at greenlight.com/podcast.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC. Yes, you heard that right. It is a normal Wednesday show, but as we were looking at things, we're recording a little bit later than usual on Tuesday day after the Champions League football. We realised that perhaps people didn't really want to hear about the relegation races around Europe today. We'll post that on for another week, and then we might just start by doubling down on the Champions League this week. 2 episodes of Champions League Takeaway, 1 after each night of the football this week. So that's how we're going to play it. My name is Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me across the waters from San Diego, 7 hours behind rather than the usual 8. It's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. We're edging closer together, aren't we? I say I'm good. I've actually had, I haven't had a voice until this morning. So if I sound a bit croaky, people, or a bit congested, it's because I am a little bit of both. But trust me, if it was 24 hours ago, I wouldn't have even sounded this good. So at least I'm able to talk about what we've just seen tonight in these 4 deciders from this first batch of last 16 games. And obviously it's just concluded with that penalty shootout at Anfield.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is it, right? It felt like this is the thing that people are going to be talking about. This is the thing that is going to dominate the headlines. And I thought it was the right time to do it. To be honest, the first thing I thought about while I was watching this game and thinking about changing this episode was, what if we did the best games from across Europe this season and rank those? Because I think we've just seen over 2 legs, at the very least, one of them play out between Liverpool and PSG. Yeah. And it's a funny old game. This is where I wanted to kind of start. We'll do this in part 1, and then in part 2, we'll talk about the other games that happened tonight. We'll talk about Inte seeing on final. We'll talk about Bayern getting the best of Leverkusen again and what's been an absolute thumping across 2 legs. And of course, about Barcelona's very, very impressive early win over Benfica tonight as well. But PSG Liverpool feels like the place to begin. PSG progressing on penalties after a tie that ended 1-1 after, I was going to say 180 minutes, but 210 minutes. And it was pretty enthralling from minute 1 to minute 210 and then the penalty shootout, Dean. It's a funny game. And I say that because last week on Champions League Takeaway, we sat here and we talked about the fact that PSG had been absolutely sensational, that Liverpool had no answers, and that Liverpool had won that game 1-0. And this week, I thought Liverpool were a whole lot better. This was a far more even contest. There were big opportunities at both ends. There were major moments. Liverpool felt like they had so much more control of this game than they did the one in Paris last week. And yet, PSG win the game 1-0. The tying goes all the way to penalties. And it's PSG who end up progressing despite the fact they didn't play probably quite as well as they did last week. And sometimes you have to just sort of nod your head and go, football throws up these things for us sometimes.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I would say that PSG deserve it over the 2 legs. I'd say that they are the deserving team to have progressed from this one. So it's a very interesting night and a tough night for Arne Slot. Coming into this week, it was obviously a big one. Going into a Carabao Cup final as well. Liverpool have now got weary legs and they've also got jaded minds on the back of a defeat that has kind of humbled them. It's a penalty shootout defeat, which I find penalty shootout victories hard to get excited about because it comes down to luck, it comes down to whatever. Like it's very difficult to decide a penalty shootout and whether the winning team was deserved to win the tie or not. So I sometimes think, look, it's the way it's gone. You've lost, but it's a penalty shootout. It's like a coin flip. But for this Liverpool team in this moment, I think it's a bit deeper than that. And I think it does raise some question marks about how they now fare in the late stage of this season. I think it's a relief to them that they're as far clear now in the Premier League as they are, because I don't think it can have as bad effects as otherwise might have been the case. But it definitely opens up what happens in that other cup competition that they'll expect to win. I thought tonight Donnarumma has made the kind of saves that kind of Alisson made in the first leg that we talked about. And then one of my Liverpool mates texted me after the game, is like, look, if we'd have taken our chances, we'd have won. Like, well, PSG could say that from last week. They could say, if we take our chances, we'd have won 6-0. Like, that's not how it works. And
he's right, but it doesn't make the point right. If you know what I mean.
Exactly. Like, well, that's what goalkeepers are for. Like, I'm not going to get into the goalkeeper debate, but we've got 2 fantastic goalkeepers here. I do think there's a point of like, another one of my mates texted, is like, imagine you're taking a penalty of that much pressure and Donnarumma's taking up the goal. Imagine how small that goal looks.
I got to say, I mean, I thought he was good tonight. There was a lot of punching, and there was the first half, it was a little bit flappy at times, but I criticised him at the end of last game, and maybe that was a little bit harsh based on the fact that he hadn't had all that much to do over the course of the 90 minutes in Paris. But as you saw Alisson down one end saving absolutely everything. And to be honest, Alisson made a couple of wonderful saves tonight as well to keep things in extra time. But when you kind of look at, over the whole leg, when it comes to penalties, I can't imagine there's much worse than standing in front of Gigi Donnarumma, right? As a goalkeeper, do I think he's in the top 5 in the world? No. I think Alisson Becker is, but I don't think Gigi Donnarumma, and I think he's had too many clangers and too many sort of missteps in the last few years at PSG to have put him in that conversation. When it comes down to spot kicks from 12 yards, I can't imagine there's anybody worse than watching him in goal, because that's what you mean. He takes up so much space. And the way that he gets down for that Curtis Jones penalty in particular, I'm not sure the Darwin one's particularly well struck as a penalty, but the Curtis Jones one, it would have struck that and gone, that's in, that's fine. And the way that Donnarumma, all 6'6" of him, gets down to save that penalty. It's pretty remarkable in so many ways. And he's come up trumps here in a moment where there has been relative criticism of him. I don't think it's been as bad as it has been in other years. But after one goalkeeper dominates the headlines in the first leg, the other one is potentially taking a little bit of flack. And then Donnarumma steps up here and he does what he does best, which is a penalty shootout, and he wins the tie for PSG. And suddenly the narrative is completely changed.
Mate, I mean, look, we've got to take this on face value. Say you were an alien sent down to watch your first couple of football matches, right? And the first one you watched was last week, and you watched PSG take on that Liverpool team and lose that game 1-0, right? You would have been absolutely bemused by how PSG had managed to lose that game. And you'd have come into this second game, and if somebody said to you, so what are you expecting? You'd be like, well, I've never seen a football match before, but if that team plays like that again, then they win, because you can't create that many chances against a team as good as Liverpool takes some doing. And what we know about this PSG team is that they have courage, bravery, youth. They're not tarnished by past errors and mistakes and failures that other PSG teams have been. So there's a fearlessness about them. And so if you take all of that into account and say, this is what we get at Anfield, it's no real surprise that PSG have come out on top. And I think, again, they deserve to. I think another thing I was thinking about during the late stages of this game and as we got to penalties, this week there's been some talk, obviously, around Man United's money and the way that they've spent it. And one of the things that came out of it was Jim Ratcliffe making almost fun of the past, saying we even found out that there was a body language consultant earning 175 grand a year.
Which seems to have been disproved in the press, by the way. Weird.
I was thinking that's actually really clever to spend money on a body language expert, because a body language expert, right, would help the management, the players, understand so many different things about themselves, about the opposition too. And once you get into that penalty shootout, there are a couple of things you would have noticed. Darwin Núñez didn't fancy it. Darwin Núñez, if you'd have got your body language consultant ahead of those spot kicks and said, could you just have a quick look at the players and who should and shouldn't have one? He'd be like, he absolutely shouldn't have one. Darwin Núñez was the last person I think that should be taking one. As you're number 9, your striker, you think, yeah, he's taking one. And fair play to him, he can only put himself in that situation. It's a very, no matter how good you are, I don't want to take away from the pressure that you're
under.
You
still have to be incredibly brave, right?
You still have to be brave. But he shouldn't, given what we know of Darwin Núñez's, fragility mentally, I don't think he seemed in a good place to take it. And equally, Curtis Jones, again, a courageous player, someone who's not going to balk at a chance like that.
Also, that penalty was fine. I don't think Darwin's was particularly good. I think that is a very, very good save.
What I was going to say with Curtis Jones is, from a PSG perspective, I think you could have guessed where he was going to put that. But the more I looked at it, I was like, it's pretty obvious he's going in that corner, actually. Anyway, this isn't to talk too much about body language, but I just thought it was interesting because that really did come across to me in the shootout. And I thought it's funny. It's been kind of a trend of the last couple of days. The other thing I think is absolutely telling here for Liverpool is this is a season when Mo Salah has carried them through some big moments and through some disappointing displays. When things haven't been good, Mo Salah's usually been the guy that rescues them, right? And they don't have someone good enough to stand up in the moments. And Luis Diaz was poor tonight. Darwin Núñez wasn't very good when he came.
You actually? I thought
I think his decision
was probably the best player on the park.
Well, in terms of his finishing, he wasn't, and his decision making, he wasn't.
Okay, fair enough.
He made moments, but he didn't take most of those moments. If you look at the big moments that went begging, it was Luis Diaz. And that can't happen in games like this.
In this moment, I think you kind of, it's obviously, we're quite raw off the back of this. And so it's important to kind of discuss these things out and chat them through. And also, we can have differing views. But I didn't think Luis Diaz should have started this game. Right. And if Cody Gakpo was potentially fully fit, maybe he wouldn't have, because I thought that what Liverpool lacked in the first leg was control, the ability to actually get the ball down and slow the game down and ease some of the pressure that just mounted over the course of that first leg in Paris. And actually, I thought maybe with Cody Gakpo there, you have a little bit more security in possession. You have a player who's just going to retain it a little bit more rather than taking on his fullback every single time. And I thought it was notable how much Hakimi came into the game once Luis Diaz went off. I thought the way that Hakimi started marauding forward because he was no longer worried about Luis Diaz doing him down the outside every single time was really, really interesting because suddenly there was an extra body in that PSG attack. And look, we can talk through the differences between normal time and extra time. I thought Liverpool probably shaded it over normal time. I thought PSG were the better side in extra time. And I think that, when you come to all of that, for someone who really didn't think that this was the game for Luis Diaz, I thought it was a game where Liverpool just had to exert a little bit more control. I thought that he was the player that got them out of tight spaces. He was the player that opened the game up, made things happen. And I agree with you. Obviously, his finishing was slightly erratic at times, and the decision-making in terms of not shooting and trying to come back across the box when opportunities arose, 100%. But I think without him, Liverpool would have carried far less threat. And actually, he was the one that really was the spark for Liverpool over the course of, especially that first 90 minutes.
Well, the spark, but my point is that Liverpool outside of Salah don't have someone clinical enough to get them through moments like this. If it's not Salah, then where is the other 9? Because you look at the game and Diogo Jota's been not on form since he came back from injury. Luis Diaz didn't take the chances that came his way here. Darwin Núñez didn't impress me once he came on for Jota. Cody Gakpo obviously came on for Diaz, but he's been out for a while and hasn't got that sharpness. Like it just makes me realise how much Liverpool do need a new forward. And I think it'll be really interesting to see where they go with that. You flip it over and you look at like what PSG had in attack. I just thought they were much more of a threat over the course of the 2 legs. And it's quite surprising, really, that a side that's been as dominant as Liverpool have in the Premier League, which is supposed to be so superior to the league in France, and that's supposed to count for something when you get to these nights because of the competitiveness, it really wasn't.
There's a change, I think, in terms of what this PSG side are, how mature they are. And that was an important word, I think, tonight, maturity. The PSG sides of old would have lost their heads in the cauldron at Anfield. And it was very, very loud tonight. And yet this PSG side seemed very, very unfazed by it. And look, maybe that comes from the performance that they put in. Weirdly, if PSG had played badly in the first leg and won 1-0, I think they would have come in tonight with far less confidence. And yet, it swung sort of from end to end. There were opportunities for Liverpool. And Mo Salah didn't have his best game. I thought Nuno Mendes had another phenomenal game.
He was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. Probably man of the match.
Sensational over the 2 legs. I thought that the midfield battle was far more competitive in this second leg, and that Liverpool they were able to get into it and actually, add a little bit of physicality to the game, which just knocked Vitinha and João Neves a little bit off their stride. They were still excellent, but they didn't have the same dominant control that they had in the first leg of this game. And so you come to that, and what I was thinking about was I was watching that first half in particular and thinking, this might be 2 of the 3 best sides in Europe going at it right now. And that's what we got early, right? Liverpool will look at this and they'll go, this new Champions League format's a bit rubbish, isn't it? We won the league and this is what we got rewarded with. And, that's a little bit of a shrug, and, it'll happen to different teams over the course of the next few years. But right now, that's not going to be something that eases the pain, because ultimately you don't want it. And they're right. PSG have grown into this season. But I thought what Arne Slot said before the game was interesting. I was listening to his sound bites earlier, and he said PSG were the most complete side that Liverpool have come up against so far this season. And whilst that might seem obvious in terms of it's a game in the Champions League when they're so far clear in the Premier League, this is a team that's already faced Leverkusen, who were good at that point in the season, have a bit of a wobble now, as we'll talk about later. They've played Real Madrid, they played them off the park. Yes, Real Madrid weren't as good then as they are right now, but this was a PSG side who have grown into this season, who are really starting to buy in to their coach's philosophy, who look like they're playing for each other, who are so fluid in the way that this attack works. And I thought that, watching them play football, they might not be the complete package yet, right? They might end up going out to a team that's a little bit more streetwise than them and just has that edge. But what we saw over these 2 legs was them beat a Liverpool team who have swept all comers over the course of the season so far. And, as you said, were good value for it. I thought that tonight could have gone either way. But I think over the course of the two legs, you're probably right. PSG edged the tie. And so when you kind of look at where they are and where they've got to this season, compare this to the PSG side that were really struggling to fashion chances against Girona earlier in the season, who were cut apart on the break late on in their game against Atletico Madrid. And the growth that they have had since that period is absolutely remarkable. The way that they are playing football, the freedom with which they're expressing themselves, the front three dovetailing, the midfield balance, all of it feels like a team who are really, really comfortably right now on the right trajectory. We're talking about a side that at the start of, November or so, we're talking about potentially parting ways with their coach. The fans weren't happy with the performances in Europe. And now I'm looking at them and going, who is going to stop that PSG team? And that, I think, is a sign of a team that have been allowed to flourish within their system, who've been allowed to, have the time to grow, and look at the rewards they're reaping.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that it's the momentum of, this season that is really helping PSG now, and their best players are flourishing right now. Talk about Ousmane Dembele and the form he's in. That was his 21st goal this year, not this season.
So just for context, the player behind him is Kylian Mbappe, who has 15.
Yeah. And we all consider that, Mbappe's really turned things around at Real Madrid and he's doing really well now. Well, Dembele is really outscoring him. He's outscoring Salah. And we shouldn't overlook just how impressive this player. I mean, Dembele is probably disappointed over the course of this tie that he hasn't got more than one goal to his name for sure, right? But it can't be discounted now that PSG do go on to win the Champions League. You've tipped him up early, mate. I mean, you've got to take the glory for this one. You need to really get behind this and make sure that the world knows. Clip it up, get it out there. You called them as the dark horses to win this competition, and you might be right.
Well, we'll see. I've gone early on teams before and been burned, but I think that
you can't be burned now. They've just beaten the favourites, so.
Yeah, I mean, look, they were really impressive tonight, and I backed myself up with that one because I actually did put a bet on them when they were 23rd or something in the league table. So I've got PSG at incredibly good odds to win the Champions League, odds which will have gone down now. So it's something
good
that I can smile and be pleased about, but they've still got a long way to go. This is a first big test that they've had. You can talk about the games at the end of the group stage. You can talk about the Man City game where they're 2-0 down and they need to win that game to keep their hopes alive. And yeah, all of those things are growing experiences. But going to Anfield and winning and then having the wherewithal to get through a penalty shootout there is really, really massive. I think for this PSG side and what it will do for their confidence and their mentality as much as anything else. And look, I haven't heard what the post-match interviews are saying. I'm very, very excited to hear what Luis Enrique has to say about all of this. But he's got to have so much faith in his system at this point. He's got to have so much faith in this group of players that have bought in. He has taken the boldest of steps, right? He has come into this PSG project at a time where they were getting rid of the big names that had defined an era which in Europe had been a failure, and gone, I want to do this and I want to do it differently. And if Kylian Mbappe wants to go to Real Madrid, then that's fine, but I'm not going to play him in the back half of the season. I'm going to get this team ready. And this feels like justification and vindication for all of those moments where he would have, people would have been looking at him going, that guy looks like he's got three heads. He's just dropped Kylian Mbappe for a really important tie. And at this moment, you would say that this PSG looks better than any iteration of this side in the last decade.
Yeah, look, Luis Enrique has been very level-headed about it, actually. He said, I think both teams deserved to go through to the next phase. We beat them in Paris. And
by the way. You know what? That could have been a Champions League final and nobody would have complained about it. That, for me, I think maybe Barcelona are in this conversation with the way that they're playing at the moment, but for me, that's the best two teams in Europe.
He said, we were better than them in Paris and they were better than us here. I think my team here at Anfield, which is a special place and a special stadium, showed great personality and great character. We tried to play our best. It was very difficult and it was extremely intense. I think he's done them a little bit discredit there. I think PSG were even better than that. Yeah, Liverpool probably edged it in this sense.
I think they shaded it over 90 minutes tonight, but PSG were much the better side in extra time, right? There was one team really going out there to win it. And like I said, Hakimi then getting forward and giving that space to suddenly maraud into the midfield really changed the shape. And you saw Joao Neves dropping into that right-hand pocket in order to deal with Hakpo because he knows he doesn't have the same physicality that Luis Diaz has and that same kind of one-on-one dynamism. And then suddenly you're like, okay, now Hakimi is marauding and PSG are overloading the box in extra time. That is quite something.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, we'll do this another day, but there's a rebuild to be done at Liverpool in the summer. And the fullback positions are very intriguing to me to see what Liverpool end up doing instead of Andy Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold. It's been a great cycle for Liverpool having those two. I think we're coming to the end of both. And that's going to be very interesting to see what they do there. I feel like PSG certainly targeted those areas at times tonight and felt that there was joy to be had.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that PSG could target almost any fullback combination in the world and probably have joy with the players that are flying down those flanks at the moment. So maybe there's something in that. I thought Trent did okay, to be perfectly honest with you. I thought Robertson...
Yeah, we'll see how he is from this injury. I mean, we'll have to wait to see what the fallout is from it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, tough just on Liverpool and obviously the Carabao Cup, which we'll do more in detail on our show on Friday, our Friday Fiesta over on Patreon. But just a word on that, because Konate limps off injured, Trent Alexander-Arnold limps off injured, and they've just got 120 minutes of an incredibly weary game against a brilliant PSG side. That's not what Arne Slot would have wanted from tonight.
I think it levels things out for that Carabao Cup final. I really do. Obviously, like Newcastle will be without Anthony Gordon. Looks like Isak's going to be okay, which is extremely important to them. But Newcastle needed something to happen here in order to give them a bit more leverage in order to have a chance in that game. And I think the fact that Liverpool have gone to the wire here, gone to penalties and lost, and a couple of key players struggling with injury, I think it makes it a lot more even.
Well, at least they have the fallback of winning the league. If you'd offered that to Liverpool fans at the start of the season...
It's not a bad one, is it? Don't forget how good it's been, yeah.
Don't forget how good it's been. I think they're going to romp home to the league title now, especially without the pressure of having to go further in Europe. The Carabao Cup will be done. This will be their singular focus. I'd be surprised if Liverpool don't win it by at least 15, maybe more at this point. So we'll see how that one plays out. And just remember, Liverpool fans, in a moment that's obviously a little bit dark, if we'd offered you that at the start of the season, you would have bitten hands off to go and win the Premier League title, I think, in the first season under Arne Slot. And whilst it's disappointing, that's sometimes how it goes. And you've come up against unbelievable opposition tonight. Right, we're going to take a break there. When we come back, we'll be talking about all of the rest of the action from Tuesday's Champions League. Don't go anywhere. Hello, Rag Squad. When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds or Aviator Nation, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand and brilliant marketing, but an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the businesses, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, who are home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going... So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/ranks, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/ranks to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/ranks.
I get those goosebumps every time.
In the Champions League knockout phase on Paramount Plus,
The wait is over. It's kill or be killed.
every decisive moment gives you goosebumps.
No! Would you believe this?
I get those goosebumps every time.
It's now or never for Europe's best
Vinicius Junior!
in the ultimate club soccer competition.
Those goosebumps every time.
It's truly remarkable.
The UEFA Champions League Round of 16. Stream every match live exclusively on Paramount Plus.
There are some things in life that just shouldn't be forgotten, like bringing your keys when you leave the house, setting your fantasy lineup, and most importantly, having Hidden Valley Ranch to watch the game. Especially if wings are on the menu. Those creamy, zesty Cool Ranch flavors take each spicy, savory bite to an unforgettable level. Hidden Valley Ranch, only serious about flavor.
Did you know 39% of teen drivers admit to texting while driving? Even scarier, those who text are more likely to speed and run red lights. Shockingly, 94% know it's dangerous but do it anyway. As a parent, you can't always be in the car, but you can stay connected to their safety with Greenlight Infinity's driving reports. Monitor their driving habits, see if they're using their phone, speeding, and more. These reports provide real data for meaningful conversations about safety. Plus, with weekly updates, you can track their progress over time. Help keep your teens safe. Sign up for Greenlight Infinity at greenlight.com/podcast.
Welcome back to an extra episode of Champions League Takeaway here on Ranks FC, where it's time to talk about the other three teams that have qualified for the quarterfinals. And Dean, I want to start with the early game where Barcelona overcame Benfica 3-1 to win 4-1 on aggregate in this tie. And much as I'd love to talk about how this was really, really difficult for Barcelona on what was an incredibly emotional night for them. The first game that they've played since the incredibly tragic death of Carlos Monaro, who died at the weekend, a first-team club doctor, and their game against Osasuna was postponed because it happened so close to kickoff. You know, the emotions that were around the club before kickoff were all very much present in what was a really dominant display and a dazzling display from the dynamic duo of Rafinha and Lamine Yamal. And, you know, both breaking records left, right, and centre at this point. So just as a kind of breather and just to start us off, Rafinha scored twice tonight, which puts him top of the Champions League scoring chart. He overtook Sergio Girassi, who obviously plays tomorrow night. But no Brazilian player in Champions League history has ever scored more in a single Champions League campaign. Now, obviously, he's played a few more games at this point, but equally, still a very, very impressive thing. And Lamine Yamal became the youngest player in Champions League history to score and assist in a single match. So there we go. Barcelona unbeaten in 17 across all competitions in 2025. They've won 14 of those. They scored 56 and conceded 17. They're averaging over 3 goals a game over the course of 2.5 months, which is pretty nutty. And this was the Lamine show to begin with. The assist he picks up for the first goal is absolutely sublime. And whilst
it's definitely an assist and it's not a dodgy shot.
No, I think he's trying to do that. I mean, there's a lot of players I'll be like, there's absolutely no way on earth he meant that. But I'm going to give Lamine Yamal the credit.
50-50, man. I'm 50-50
I'm going to give him the credit on this one. It's ridiculous. But even the feat before that, mate, the way that he sends about 4 players sliding all over the place.
Oh, yeah,
over for hot dogs, etc. And then, obviously, Rafinha taps it in. And then he gets the ball after Otamendi equalises. He gets a bit nervy. He picks the ball up, drives inside. He curls an absolute beauty into the top corner. It's game over, job done. Like the heads go down from a Benfica perspective. And look, they battled all the way to the end. But the heads go down because they're like, what can we do? Like, what can we do? Yeah. This kid is 17 and he's tearing us apart like shredded paper.
Yeah, I mean, they looked a bit bewildered on that first on that goal he scores that makes it 2-1. Because they kind of done the right thing in terms of pressing him backwards and sending him into a space that typically you wouldn't think he'd really want to go into. He's running backwards and then curls it into the far corner. I mean, madness, really, that he's got the guile to just go and do that. But this is what he does, right? And this is his competition. Do you think Barcelona are now better as a cup team than they are going to be as a league team to go and get the job done in this competition? Like, where do you see that their biggest possibilities are from here?
I said this kind of at the back end of last year, that I thought that they had a real chance at the Champions League because on their day, I think they can beat almost anyone. But over a league campaign, was there going to be enough in the tank? Were they going to be mature enough? I think what we've seen in 2025 is a side who have begun the new year like they began the season. Now, maybe there is a similar drop-off to what we saw over that kind of Christmas period with the sustained number of games they're having to play. But I'm more confident in them in kind of both fronts, if anything. They feel like, okay, the high line is risky, right? And the high line is risky, but equally, they're executing it to perfection over and over and over again. And the more reps you get with that, the more you trust it, right? And that's kind of what we've got to. I've got to the point where I trust the Barcelona high line. Now, maybe someone can exploit it, but I think we've seen them come up against a variety of very good opposition, and they have raised their game against almost all of them over the course of the season so far. And so when you're watching them, when you're watching the season that Rafinha's putting together, when you're watching what Lamine Yamal is, doing to people, twisting them up in knots from that right-hand side, when you're seeing the balance that seems to be there in midfield, Pedri tonight, I mean, we've spoken about him at length, obviously, over the course of this season, but the most flawless display I have seen in the middle of the park for a long, long time. And not only the
Coutinho and Jalnev's are listening, mate.
I mean, look, this is it. Just add him to my list of Jack's favourite type of player. But what I loved about Pedri tonight was he got stuck in. And I'm not saying he doesn't always do this, but he made about 5-6 challenges. It was like watching a player in there who had an absolute point to prove. And Pedri really doesn't have that much to prove to the rest of us anymore. Pedri is world class. We've known that for a long time. Nothing has changed in that regard. But he was in there like a little dynamo, kind of fulfilling a bit of the Gavi role, flying about, bobbing into challenges, making his presence felt, and then having the wherewithal to keep the ball in these situations, to make sure that his passing was bang on, pretty much the whole thing. I think it was Glenn Hoddle commentating who basically was like, I don't know if he's misplaced a pass tonight. I think he had, but I think it might have been one. It was that kind of performance where, despite the fact that Lamine Yamal got the assist and the goal, despite the fact that Rafinha got the double, there was no question in my mind that Pedri was man of the match. And I was really glad to see him get that. And when it's starting to flick on to the observers, etc., that they could be like, okay, we're not going to give it to the two players who are going to take the spotlight. We're going to give it to the man who's made everything tick. You've had a pretty sumptuous display in the middle of the park.
Yeah, he completed 84 of his 88 passes, Pedri, so a 95% accuracy from him on that front. So Glenn Hoddle was slightly wrong. He gave a few away, but literally a few. Won 5 out of 5 tackles, 10 recoveries. Just an all-action display from him, and it's it takes a lot to win man of the match in a game when Rafinha and Lamine Yamal have done that. So that goes to show that sometimes there are other types of performance that are acknowledged. Maybe it's the Rodri effect, right? Maybe it's the Rodri effect that's making people view football a little differently now from just the game definers and the goal scorers. But he's obviously outstanding. We've said it many times, and he is a game changer himself.
It's a weird one, isn't it? I just want to give a quick shout out to Benfica because they didn't actually do a lot wrong tonight. You're watching this game and they put in a very complete display. They're riddled with injuries, especially in that kind of right back role because Alexander Barr is out at the moment. And then Thomas Araujo has been kind of fulfilling that role out of position a little bit in his absence, was also kind of ruled out. And suddenly you're like, oh God, who's actually going to play in that role, especially when you've got Rafinha pegging it down the wing towards you, over and over and over again. But I thought they were slightly outclassed by a better side. They put in everything. They left it all on the table. And I think they can come out of that performance being very, very proud. They might have some regrets over not being able to take advantage of having the extra man for such a long period in the first leg. But I don't think they'll have too many regrets from tonight. I think they did as much as they possibly could. Just Barcelona too good at this point and looking very, very strong as we get into these quarterfinals. Where do you see them in terms of the favourites list? I know we did this as like an episode, but things changed very quickly in the Champions League. And I thought it was an interesting point to maybe just sit down and be like, okay, how does this actually shake out?
Well, look, my 1, 2, 3, as we came into this, after we did our power rankings, I had Madrid at 1, Liverpool 2, Barcelona at 3. I think I had Bayern at 4, PSG at 5. So I would now, obviously, just for now, Liverpool are removed, and I'd just say that
everyone moves up 1.
Everyone moves up 1. I guess I'm a little bit hotter on PSG given what I've just seen. Yeah, I find that a little more difficult. Obviously, PSG probably going to have Aston Villa in the next round, but Barcelona are going to have obviously Dortmund or Lille. So I see them both in pretty comfortable situations to get through to the semi-finals. So honestly, I think it come down to it, right? As I predicted it to fall out, it would be a Barcelona-Bayern Munich semi-final. Like that's what I've had in my head as how it will pan out. and they're such different teams. That's going to be such a difficult one to call. My hunch actually would be that Barca might have it over them. If I see that again, then I think Barcelona will beat them.
Yeah, I mean, well, they've already beaten them once this season quite comfortably. So we'll obviously see. I mean, look, let's come on to Bayern because it's time to give you some credit. You were pretty bullish that Bayern would get their way through this game against Leverkusen, this tie. I was unconvinced by this Bayern Munich team. And I got to say that the first leg was quite something. I thought they took advantage of Leverkusen being off it and they put themselves in a pretty unassailable position. But what I thought from Bayern's performance tonight was that's the best I've seen them over the course of this entire season. That's the best performance I've seen from Bayern Munich. And yes, they only won 2-0 rather than 3-0 like they did in the first leg. But this was fundamental domination from the outset. And I was expecting Leverkusen to put up a bit of a fight. And it was one-way traffic from those boys in white. So congratulations. A great call, a good pick. I was really low on Bayern. And they seem to just be coming into things at the right time.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, this tie, for my liking, was already dead before they came into it. And obviously, Bayern had a strange result coming into it because they lost at the weekend. But, it was a bit of a patched up team. João Palhinha got a red card and stuff and rested a few players. So I didn't read too much into that defeat, even though it was still a little strange. It's just that, like, experience and trust that I have in a group of as their strongest 11 stands. Like Bayern Munich, I still believe have a very good chance to win the Champions League, obviously, as I said. But they are a very different outfit to a side like Barcelona. And Barcelona on their day could do this Bayern team. Leverkusen, they had to make the most of the first half when their opportunities came along in this game. And
even then, though, it felt like Bayern had the better. Obviously, Leverkusen fired off a lot of shots in that first half, but Bayern had the better opportunities. And if someone was going to take the lead, it felt like it was going to be Bayern.
Yeah, Leverkusen's chances seemed like half chances to me.
Yeah, I thought that it made a bit more sense, the Leverkusen setup today. We saw, obviously the wing backs coming back into play with Frimpong and Grimaldo wide. Artur played a really weird role where he sort of dropped back into right back at times, but it was kind of what it was. They tried to block out the midfield. And obviously, the moment Florian Wirtz walks off injured in Leverkusen's loss at the weekend, you start to think maybe hope's gone here, without their star boy, without their playmaker, without the person through who it all goes through. Was there really going to be any hope that they could turn this around? And I think the answer was probably no. But by the end of the first half, I was pretty sure that the answer was emphatically no, despite the fact it was 0-0 in the tie at that point.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And for the absence of Wirtz, you then flip it over to the other side and just see what Bayern had at their disposal, and it's quite frightening, really, when you've got Elise and Musiala and
Musiala danced here. I love it when Musiala's in dancing form, and he sparkled.
Yeah, and Kane, man, like he's just a goal. He's just a predator, like almost no other. There's not many that do it like him at the moment. Maybe Lewandowski gets into similar sorts of positions and scores similar sorts of goals, but even like it's a scruffy one, really, that puts them 1-0 up in this second leg. But it's pure like that. That's what a 9 is for. Like I'm talking about what Liverpool haven't got. They haven't got that. They haven't got that sort of 9 to fall back on. And they have got someone who's a goal scorer in the sense of Salah. He doesn't get into these positions and isn't like just determined in the same way in the positions that he gets in to score those big goals. And obviously once that goal went in, there was no way that Leverkusen were coming back into the tie. So very, very convincing to come off the back of a two-legged tie against Leverkusen and win it 5-0. It sent out a strong message.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I said on last week's episode that I thought that Xabi Alonso got a lot wrong in the first leg. I thought that he deployed the system that just didn't really work, and that Bayern had obviously strengthened and learned from the last times that these two met each other. I realised that, you kind of look at this tie and he thinks, well, I'm going to have to unleash something. I have to go unleash the chaos. But I thought Bayern's press in particular really kind of stifled anything Leverkusen were trying to build at source. And it led them to this kind of weird array of pot shots from distance. Maybe Schick should do better. The header in the first half that he kind of glances wide, but it's a little bit high for him. And you kind of come to that point where Leverkusen really needed just a moment, a spark to even ignite any sort of real flame of hope at halftime. And by halftime, I think this one was pretty much wrapped. But I will say this, as much as you are talking about that potential Bayern versus Barcelona semi-final, I think that Bayern still have a lot of work to do if they're going to get past this Inte side, who ended up winning 2-1 against Feyenoord, which made it 4-1 on aggregate. It could and very much should have been more. How they didn't score again in the second half, I don't think I will ever know. After they've gone 2-1 up in this one, there are opportunities galore for a variety of players who don't take them. But Inter conceded, which is rare, although it was from the penalty spot, Jakob Moder coming on there to score for Feyenoord. But this side, at the moment, feel like they're really, really going in the right direction. And Marcus Thuram feels like the kind of player who's going to make differences. There you go. We're talking about number 9s making differences, right? Yeah. Marcus Thuram, and the goal he scores here for Inter is absolutely sublime. His goal in the first leg is good. This one is ridiculous. He just cuts in off the left-hand side and curls beauty into the top corner. And, from that moment, I mean, to all intents and purposes, I think this tie was dead before the second leg even kicked off. But you come to that moment, you're like, right, that is it, done and dusted. And I think that when you kind of look at what Inter are putting together, the teams that they are able to field at the moment. And yes, they're still a little bit light at fullback, and Carlos Augusto had to play here after just coming back from an injury. They're still missing a load of players. But, he rested players here, Dean. You look at the substitutes bench and Barella's sitting on it. Bastoni is sitting on it. Lautaro Martinez is sitting on the substitutes bench.
Yeah.
That's how little that Inzaghi thought that he needed to kind of work this tie in order to come on. And I think that as they grow into the season, as those players come back, and as he starts to look at this with a little bit more of a clinical eye, perhaps with one eye on that Bayern tie, those players coming back in are going to make a major, major difference.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, you got to talk about the Thuram goal. What I kind of loved about it was like he obviously picks the ball up in this huge space out on the left side, and he's pushing himself forwards, but he doesn't do it with any pace, really. In fact, like Feyenoord start that moment with only 2 players back behind the goal, and they're very central. They're a long way away from him. And by the time that Thuram actually makes it to the corner of the D, they've started to get players back, and then he has to cut back on himself. Kind of similar to how Lamine Yamal did in the Barcelona game, but from the other angle.
Side, yeah.
But by the time he's done that, Feyenoord have 5, maybe 6 players back in the vicinity of their own goal mouth to try and block it. And he just absolutely pings one literally into the top bins, as you'd call it. If you were watching Soccer AM, it would have got into the top bin back in the day. It was a perfect strike. And it was just like the control that it took in the approach play and then the finish was exactly what you want to see in terms of discipline of a side and how they're not panicking. Such an early stage of the game as well, 8 minutes in. And that's the sort of quality that we're seeing here. I understand what you're saying about them putting up that fight to push themselves towards the final. I get it. I mean, I don't know. I've still got reservations about them, even though that their form doesn't really suggest that I should have that, because they are winning. There's something holding me back here, and I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is either, because I think they're excellent. I really do. And I think that it's going to be very intriguing, that tie. I mean, look, it's the only one that's completely confirmed at this point that we are going to be seeing Bayern against Inter in the quarterfinals. And although it's pretty set, it's going to be Arsenal against one of the Madrid teams in the first of the quarterfinals. And then it will be PSG against either Aston Villa or Club Brugge, probably Aston Villa, barring something pretty spectacular. And then Barcelona against either Lille or Borussia Dortmund. And I know people will look at the Madrid side against Arsenal and say that's the pick of the round. But for me, it's this, right? Bayern, who are starting to move in the right direction, that 5-0 aggregate win there against an Inter side who I think have the capacity to win this whole thing, I think does feel like the kind of tie that could be really, really defining in it. If you looked at the games that are on in this round of 16, I looked at Atleti against Real Madrid as a potential definer. I looked again at Liverpool against PSG as a potentially defining tie in terms of which teams were going to be in the next round, but also which teams could potentially be in the semi-finals and final. And I think the Bayern Inter for me feels like one that might well have that kind of impact as well. So for me, that's the pick of the quarterfinals, even though we don't know what the full extent of them is. And that's a pretty cool place to be after one night of Champions League action on a 2-night week.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where Inter's season is situated by the time we get to that Bayern game, because obviously they're only a point clear at the top of Serie A as it stands at the moment, and they've got a big game coming up against Atalanta that's key to them actually winning the league this season. They've got a Coppa Italia game coming up, which is a Milan derby. And then around it, they've got a couple of games which will be expected to as victories before they get to that Bayern tie. And the first game, obviously, is away for Inter Milan as well. So, no, I'm going with Bayern Munich to beat Inter Milan. I think that Inter have got a lot on their plate here, and I think that Bayern just have an edge on them as it stands.
Yeah, I mean, look, they definitely have less, other focuses, considering how clear they are at the top of the Bundesliga, and the Inter are on for a potential treble if everything goes to plan. But I'm not going to write off this Inter side. I've been a big fan of them for a long time, and I think.
Well, you don't rate Vincent Kompany either. Let's face it.
I think the Vincent Kompany is going to be an excellent manager. I just don't think he's there yet. And I think that this Bayern side has serious flaws in defensive areas that haven't been addressed, despite the fact that they beat a Leverkusen side who really didn't show up over either tie. And I think there are still problems to be had with this Bayern side that Inter might well be able to expose. So that's where we're at. One of those coaches I see as one of the best, probably 3 coaches in Europe, and one of them I see as an up-and-comer with a potentially bright future. And I know where I'm going to stick my money when it comes to a tie like that. But for now, I think that's probably a good place for us to put a pin in it. We'll be back, obviously, tomorrow to talk about all of Wednesday's action and discuss that big second leg in the Madrid derby, as well as a couple of other very, very interesting games poised on a little bit of a knife edge. Not Arsenal PSV, which should be routine, barring something particularly spectacular from PSV Eindhoven, which I don't think they quite have in the locker right now. But from us, it's thank you very, very much for listening. Thank you very, very much to Mr. Dean Jones.
Cheers, mate.
I've been Jack Collins. This has been Champions League Takeaway, the first of 2 here on Ranks FC this week. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and it's a little bit different from our usual rankings, but we thought this was the thing to be talking about, and this is the thing you'd like when you woke up on your Wednesday mornings looking for something to get stuck into from a football perspective. So we'll see you all tomorrow. From us for now, thanks very much, and we'll see you shortly. Take it easy, Rank Squad. Peace.
There are some things in life that just shouldn't be forgotten, like bringing your keys when you leave the house, setting your fantasy lineup, and most importantly, having Hidden Valley Ranch to watch the game. Especially if wings are on the menu. Those creamy, zesty Cool Ranch flavors take each spicy, savory bite to an unforgettable level. Hidden Valley Ranch, only serious about flavor.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Sign up for Greenlight today at greenlight.com/podcast.